How far would an empire go to preserve its dominance over the ancient world? In 30 BC, two ancient powers faced each other in what would be a titanic battle for supremacy over the Mediterranean. Rome, with its disciplined army and unstoppable expansion, was at its peak, but there was one civilization that still maintained its independence: Egypt. In this mythical land, ruled by the seductive and shrewd Cleopatra VII, one of the most intense and dramatic confrontations in history would unfold. Rome had defeated all its enemies, but could it truly destroy Egypt, the jewel of the ancient world? At the head of the Roman army was Octavian, Julius Caesar's adopted son, who not only sought to avenge the death of his mentor, but also to consolidate his absolute power over Rome and its territories. Facing him were Cleopatra and her ally, the ambitious Mark Antony, fighting not only to maintain control of Egypt, but also to save an ancient culture from being absorbed by the Roman imperial machine. This confrontation would not be just a war of armies, but a clash of civilizations, of values, and of boundless ambitions. In the dust of this battle, the fate of an entire era would be decided, the beginning of a fatal enmity. Rome, a republic that became an empire through war and conquest, had already faced its own internal struggles. The power struggles between the greatest generals, such as Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Mark Antony, tore apart the old republican structure. Amid this chaos, Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt, found herself in an even more delicate situation. With her charm, intelligence, and diplomatic skills, Cleopatra allied herself with Caesar to ensure Egypt's independence. With him, she had a son, Caesarion, who was seen by many as the legitimate heir to the Roman Empire. But Caesar's assassination in 44 BC left Cleopatra in a vulnerable position, and she quickly aligned herself with Mark Antony, one of the most powerful leaders of Rome at the time. Their alliance was not only political. Cleopatra and Antony became lovers, their relationship as passionate as it was strategic. Their union seemed perfect, but it also had a shadow. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, who, as he gained power, would become the true rival for total dominance over Rome. The rise of Octavian and the fall of the Alliance Octavian, initially an ally of Antony during the early days of the Second Triumvirate, soon became his main rival. Tensions between the two former allies quickly exploded. Mark Antony, despite being an exceptional military strategist, did not fully understand the power of Roman propaganda, an art in which Octavian was a master. Cleopatra, who had been revered in Egypt as a living goddess, began to be portrayed as a foreign threat and manipulator, a woman who corrupted the Romans with her sensuality and influence. Through his skillful political maneuvers and passionate speeches, Octavian began to win the support of the Roman Senate. The smear campaign against Mark Antony and Cleopatra was fierce, accusing them of planning to divide the Roman Empire and hand its glory over to Egypt. Cleopatra's last card and the Battle of Actium War became inevitable. In 31 BC, the fleets of Mark Antony and Cleopatra faced each other in the Battle of Actium, a naval confrontation that would mark the fate of Rome and Egypt. The waters of the Ionian Sea bore witness to one of the most important battles in history, where Agrippa, the Roman admiral, demonstrated his cunning and naval superiority. Although Cleopatra's forces were larger, the sea was not on her side. In a strategic retreat, Cleopatra abandoned the battle, leaving Antony alone to face defeat. This decision was a devastating blow to the Egyptian forces, who watched their last hope crumble. With Cleopatra's retreat, Octavian felt closer than ever to achieving his goal. Egypt was no longer just a disputed territory. It was the last obstacle to Rome's absolute domination. The march to Egypt, the fall of a civilization. After the humiliation, at Actium, Antony and Cleopatra retreated to Alexandria, where they began to prepare a final defense. Octavian, relentless, began his march to Egypt. Along the way, his legions, disciplined and well-supplied, overcame the harsh Egyptian deserts. The march to the city of Alexandria was arduous, but the Roman determination never faltered. Intelligence, reports indicated that Egyptian resistance was weakening rapidly. Cleopatra's troops' morale also began to drop as Octavian's forces closed in. The situation in Alexandria became increasingly desperate. Cleopatra, firm in her position, began reinforcing the city's walls, organizing her 30,000 Egyptian warriors to resist the Roman siege. Nearby cities began to empty, and rumors of Octavian's imminent arrival sowed panic among the population. The last bastion, Alexandria, under siege. In the final weeks before the last confrontation, Cleopatra and Mark Antony made a last-ditch attempt to negotiate with Octavian. They offered him tributes, trade concessions, and even a personal alliance, but Octavian, driven by his unyielding desire to destroy any remnants of opposition, rejected these offers. To him, yielding to Cleopatra meant losing absolute control over Rome. The tension in Alexandria reached its peak. The Roman force was already unstoppable. As the 30,000 Egyptian warriors lined up for their final defense, Octavian's legions began surrounding the city, starting the final siege. Cleopatra, with the courage that had always characterized her, led her army in a series of desperate counterattacks. The fight was fierce, and for a moment hope seemed to rise in the Egyptian ranks. The fall of Egypt, a final sacrifice, Cleopatra and Antony's last defense, was a heart-wrenching effort. Mark Antony, gravely wounded in battle, fought with all that he had left. But the resistance crumbled. The 30,000 warriors who had sworn loyalty to Cleopatra could not withstand the Roman power, which was superior in number and tactics. Finally, when Cleopatra realized that Alexandria's fall was inevitable, she made a heartbreaking decision. She would not be captured alive by Rome. According to legend, Cleopatra committed suicide alongside Mark Antony to avoid being paraded as a trophy through the streets of Rome. Her death marked the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the beginning of a new era. Egypt became a Roman province. Rome had emerged victorious, but the price of victory was high. Cleopatra's name, along with the sacrifice of her 30,000 brave soldiers, would endure in history as a symbol of struggle, sacrifice, and resistance in the face of unstoppable power. Octavian, now Augustus, consolidated his control over the Mediterranean and became the first emperor of Rome. But the echo of this last resistance reverberated throughout the centuries, reminding everyone that even in the final breath, the spirit of a civilization never truly dies. If this story of love, power, and sacrifice has captivated you, subscribe and share this video. Do you think Cleopatra could have changed Egypt's destiny? Or was Egypt's final resistance just an inevitable struggle against Rome's rise? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and join us for the next historical exploration.